Talk of the Trollway spotlights Mount Horeb, Wisconsin's unique artists, entertainers, hobbyists, and personalities.
Willi Lehner has gone around the world and underground, all for the sake of making better cheese.
When I look at this milk, I see a satiny sheen that I rarely ever see in milk.
On this episode of Talk of the Trollway, Willi tells the story of growing up in cheese factories and the experiences which led him to begin making his own specialty cheeses right here in rural Mount Horeb. Those cheeses cure in his man-made cave, some for 8 months, some for a year or more. And when this field looks like this, Willi will again be selling his cheeses here.
And your cheese.
At the farmer's market on the Capitol Square in downtown Madison.
All right, $6.
But regardless of the temperatures outside, this cave keeps the temperature and humidity inside fairly constant. The microbes and molds happy, and Willi's customers coming back for more. I'm your host, Gary Schutz.
Today we're going to be making an Alpine-style cheese, like the great cheeses of the Alps, like Gruyere or mountain cheese. I don't have my own cheese factory. I use the facilities of other cheesemakers. And from that, it allows me to be very specific about the cheeses I make and the time of year. And that's my niche. I just kind of fell into it, just by default. It just seemed that the natural flow of things, and it was easy. I could pick and choose my hours, and I knew what I had to do. I didn't have to be continuously told or instructed, because I pretty much grew up in it. My mother and father immigrated from Switzerland back in the 50s, and then my father took on a management role at what was Reiser Brothers Cheese Company, which is now the Grumpy Troll Brew Pub. I started working there at about the age of 7 or 8, making boxes for the next day's cheese packaging. And that led into getting into more and more cleaning, and eventually I got my hands in the vat and actually helping with the production of the cheese. My father left that position and started his own cheese company, and I became an employee there, and so that grew to me becoming a licensed cheesemaker and then going off to Europe and making cheese. You look really happy this morning.
It's all a facade.
It's all a facade. That evolved into me starting my own business. I became a vendor at the farmer's market in Madison. 10 and 10 is 20. And your cheese. Thank you. From 19 until 29, I used Switzerland as home base and actually lived there for 6 of those, but also traveled all over Europe and various places. And to me, the traveling is probably the best educational experience. So one of the experiences I had when I was in Switzerland, and I was having a peak experience and I didn't even realize it, was a friend of ours. He made cheese up on these alpine pastures in the summer, and this cheese is only made 3 months of the year. We're in the mountainous areas through the Alps. The farmers don't have enough land to pasture their cows and make hay for the winter, so a cheesemaker will go to the alpine pastures, which are like 2,000 feet up above the valley floor, milk the cows, make cheese out of it in a copper kettle over a wood fire like it's been done for centuries. That was a peak experience, and it's there where I made the connection between what the cows eat and the final product. Of course, I didn't realize it till years later what a profound experience that was. I found that there's so much more to cheese, so I started producing new and different kinds of cheese to bring to my customers at the farmer's market. It's a raw milk cheese,
Yeah.
and that cheese is about 8 months old now, so at about 8 months is when the flavors really start coming through. About 10 years ago, I built a small curing room right here on my property in this straw bale greenhouse that got licensed as a dairy plant, probably the smallest dairy plant in Wisconsin, about the size of a bathroom. And there I was really able to start dabbling into the wonderful world of affinage, which is to refine a cheese from, say, an embryo, a newly made cheese, to the final product. The cheese is never packed in plastic, and it's always open to the atmosphere. We're encouraging bacteria and yeasts and molds to grow on the surface of the cheese. And that's the niche I've created for myself, especially with the building of my underground cave, which really is conducive to these microbes to grow. They're very happy in there. The cave has really outstripped my expectations, and that's where the magic happens. All I have to do is give the microbes the right environment, and they do most of the work. These first 6 racks on this side were made this year. The rest of the cheese in here was made last year, and that's what we are currently selling. Most cheeses all derive from milk, adding rennet, and going through the cheese making procedure. It's like when you have your feet in a lake, you feel the minnows nibbling. That's what the curds feel against my hand. And then where things diverge are the cultures you add to it, time and temperature. I can be making a batch of cheese, say that I'm making Alpine Renegade, all right? So I'm gonna end up with, say, 1,000 pounds of cheese. But during the cheese making process, I can take curds and weigh out at various points and come up with completely different kinds of cheese. The end result is 1,000 pounds of cheese. 900 pounds of that is going to be what I'm mainly going for, but the other 100 pounds could be 50 pounds of this and 50 pounds of that, and they're nothing like what the bulk of the cheese ends up being. So most cheeses are made from a very specific protocol, and then you can diverge from that protocol to come up with all kinds of new cheeses. The actual cheese making process is very typical. Usually I have 2 windows of time where I like to make cheese that I'll be aging for probably at least a year plus, and that's mid to late May into about the end of June, and then again in early September through the month of October. So there's like those 2 windows of time that where I feel the milk is at it's as good as it's going to get. The making of the cheese actually is relatively quick. I can walk into a cheese factory, the milk goes into the vat, and I can be walking out 6 to 8 hours later. Usually I'll have an idea of what I want to do if I'm doing a custom cheese make that I haven't done before. If I know I'm working with really good quality milk, I kind of know what the end goal is, and we definitely modify and tweak things as we're going along. Man, we make beautiful cheese together. Mm-hmm. In the aging process, that's the French word called affinage. Right? In France, that's a profession, affinage, to refine the cheese. I have found now that I've had this cave space that if I give the cheese and the microbes the right environment, which is basically the average temperature 55 degrees and around 90% humidity, they do 99.9% of the work. Because the microbes are happy, they're thriving, they have plenty of oxygen. You mentioned about cheese turning green in the refrigerator. Now you have to think about the refrigerator is much colder. It's probably 35 degrees in your refrigerator, and you've got their cheese wrapped in plastic. The molds are going to be very unhappy. So they're going to produce flavors that are kind of noxious tasting. It's not very good. And yes, you should trim it off. It's not toxic, but they don't taste good. The molds, the bacteria and yeast that are growing in the cave, because they're 20 degrees warmer, and they're not packed in plastic. They have plenty of oxygen around them. They're very happy. They produce enzymes that go into the cheese, and those enzymes give the cheese flavor. I want to be an airborne ranger. In terms of the bandaged cheddar, yes, we follow a production procedure, make procedure. That's the same every time, because that's the cheese that we make most of, that we send to cheese shops and restaurants all over the country. And they require a certain level of consistency. Everything gets sanitized. If I'm making a special batch of cheese that I primarily am going to be selling at the farmer's market in Madison, that I can tell the person buying the cheese directly, what I did and what makes this cheese special. So then I pull out the stops. We'll end up with cheeses about 1.5 inches thick when we're done. I experiment more than anyone I know. And that's what keeps cheese making fun. It's when you do things that are that other cheesemakers say, no, you can't do that. Well, yeah, I can. Here's what they look like at this point. They're still pretty soft. For a number of years, I made cheese at this small cheese plant, and then all of a sudden I couldn't make cheese there anymore. So I had the milk picked up and brought to another cheese factory, and they didn't have exactly the same equipment at this other cheese factory that I needed to make this was an Alpine style cheese. I really had to think about on the fly, how am I going to do this? And I didn't really have a clear picture in the beginning when I started, but I remember real clearly as the milk is flowing into the vat, I said, I wish anybody and everyone who knew anything about milk could see this milk because it had a sheen to it. I knew, unless I really screwed it up, this was going to be sensational cheese. And so I just started making cheese. I didn't follow a recipe. I measured cultures, and I didn't use anything special in the cultures. It was one of those things where, I modified temperatures and did a few things different, but nothing out of the ordinary, except I just eliminated one big step on the making process, and it worked. It actually went and won a first place at the American Cheese Society 2 years ago. For those of you who are wondering what bandaged cheddar is, it refers to the muslin cloth. This is pressed onto the cheese the day it's made, and that's why it's called bandaged cheddar. It stays on the cheese until it's sold, unless we're cutting it up for the farmer's market. Then we strip the bandage off, and then we cut it up into pieces. And the way I understand it is that the bandage evolved to be put on a wheel of cheese as a protection measure, because there was a time when cheesemakers didn't have good control over temperature and humidity, especially humidity. If your humidity goes all over the place, then your cheeses can crack. And if the cheese cracks, then you've got mold growing into the cheese. I want mold growing on the outside of my cheese, not in it. Unless it's blue cheese, of course. But that's a way different cheese. But so we definitely are encouraging and also creating the proper conditions for those molds to be proliferate on the outside of the cheese, because those molds have microscopic roots that grow into the cheese, and those roots give off enzymes. Here we're back to that enzyme word, and those enzymes give the cheese flavor. But that's something that takes a long period of time, a minimum of a year. When you take the bandage off, 95% of the mold goes with it because it's right on the surface, and then there's a thin rind. We trim just a tiny amount of that rind off, because that area right on the surface is going to be a little bit mustier than the center. And so then we instruct our customers to cut it so that you're getting a little bit of what was under the rind with the center of the cheese. So there's a flavor gradient through the cheese. And that's pretty much any cheese that hasn't been packed in plastic is going to have this flavor gradient, and it's good to get a cross section of the cheese. You're going to pick out flavors that I can't describe because of what the mold has imparted to the cheese. And those are just things that you have to taste it to really know what I'm talking about. And then you get the density of the cheese also, and it tastes almost like a thick, heavy fudge. And then you get little crunchies, little crystals that form after the cheese is made. About a year after it's made, you'll get these I call them the crunchies, and most people who eat aged cheese know what that is. And it's something that's highly prized because it gives a really wonderful mouthfeel when you hit one of those and they dissolve and you get these little flavor bombs. Yum. One of the reasons that artisan cheesemakers cheese is usually more expensive because they are much more labor intensive, and we're taking more risk. I've got a $300,000 hole in the ground to age the cheese, to create the environment, to create these cheeses. You can go to Brennan's, or you can go to Costco, and you can buy cheese at $2 and something a pound, or I don't even look at what it costs, but I can't even make cheese for that amount. So basically it comes down to you get what you pay for, and if you're buying a cheese from a local artisan cheesemaker, you're supporting the local economy. To me, it's more important that the customer understands what makes this cheese special and the process that went into it that makes it twice as expensive as the cheese next door. I want to be a purveyor of cheese of a level of quality that I will also eat. The farmer's market is like this phenomenal sounding board to bring out something new. And I've got my regular customers, I'll give them a sample, here, try this, what do you think? And either their eyes roll to the back of their heads, it's good, but you might want to consider doing it's a little salty, or they'll have feedback, it's too young. I know I'm on the right path when I give a sample to someone who comes up to my stand at the farmer's market. They taste the cheese, and that I think is really special. Someone who has never purchased cheese from me before, they walk away and they come back 5 minutes later and buy a piece of cheese. I'm definitely kind of like my dad that way. He had his Williisms too. His name is Willi. He was pretty colorful. Favorite Williism? Some live, some die, and some never make it. If you win the rat race, you're still a rat. That's classic.
Coming up on Talk of the Trollway, it could be you or someone you know. Let us know who we haven't met yet. Email talktrollway@gmail.com. Talk of the Trollway runs daily on Trollway TV, Mount Horeb, Wisconsin's village cable station.